You are watching Into Vietnam Weekend. I'm Thuy Linh. In our program, we will bring you comprehensive news about Vietnam's economy throughout the week, ending January the 8th, following our major stories. Vietnam's Forex reserve is projected at roughly $16 billion this year. Ho Chi Minh City continues to lead in industrial production in 2011. And our conversation with Leon Cheneval, Executive Director of Cushman and Wakefield's Hanoi office. But first, let's have a look at figures of the week.
JP Morgan Chase Bank forecasts foreign exchange reserve of Vietnam to reach $15.8 billion in 2012. In 2011, Forex reserve of the country is estimated at $12.5 billion. It is believed that if the country's inflation falls, Forex reserve will increase as local people switch to domestic currency. The bank expected Vietnam's surplus imbalance of payment could reach $3.25 billion this year, compared to $1.8 billion in 2011.
The total outstanding loans for real estate sector reached $203.6 trillion by the end of last year, down 13.5% on year. The information report of the report on real estate market in 2011, built by the Ministry of Construction in collaboration with the State Bank of Vietnam. The report detailed that the short-term property loans made up $40.89 trillion, medium and long-term loans totaled $162.7 trillion. Bad debt ratio in local real estate sector was calculated at about 4.14%.
The State Securities Commission said that 60% of Vietnam-listed companies suffered profit drops in 2011. This is the result of unfavorable macroeconomic conditions, inflation, high interest rates, and trade deficit. However, the corporate governance ability was significantly improved. Most companies have reported on periodical corporate management. In 2011, the progress of information disclosure of listed companies had achieved a positive change, as only 85 ones missed the deadline to publish financial reports in Q3, compared to 259 in Q2.
Vietnam General Department of Taxation projected total amount of tax reduction, extension and exemption to reach 5.41 trillion dong in 2012. Especially, extended taxes will account for 3.25 trillion dong. 2.16 trillion dong will be tax exemption and reduction. Ministry of Finance said it will continue implementing measures to help local enterprises tackle their financial difficulties and propose appropriate tax relief solutions. Last year, the amount of taxes being exempted, extended and reduced in Vietnam is estimated at 13.38 trillion dong.
We'll now move on to securities news. Vietnam stocks started the new year of 2012 with full week of decline. VN Index ended at 32-month low, while HNX Index hit a new all-time low.
After a whole week of decline, VN Index closed at 336.73, down 14.82 points, or 4.2% from the week before. Market liquidity averagely dropped by 54% from last Friday, totaling 23.94 million shares and fund certificates each session. In the same move, HNX Index lost 3.31 points, or 5.6%, to end at 55.43. Trading volume averaged 19.32 million units, worth 158 billion dong per trading session. The figures were down by 40% and 47% from the previous week. Investors lost confidence in equity assets at the back of long and indefinite losing trend. They sold up shares to stop losses. The market liquidity plunged by 50% compared to the week before. Foreign investors were net sellers of 3.4 million units, worth 58 billion dong on Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange. Meanwhile, they were net buyers with 31.3 billion dong worth of 2.3 million units on the northern bourse.
In the next part of the program, we'll take a look at major macroeconomics and investment events during the past week.
The Department of Industry and Trade said Ho Chi Minh City continues to lead the country in industrial production in 2011, totaling at 740 trillion dong of its total value. The city contributed 42% of the industrial production value in the southern key economic zone and accounted for 27% of the country's total. This year, the city targets to raise industrial production value by 19% to reach 881 trillion dong. For industries, including mechanical manufacturing, electronics, IT, chemicals, or to make up at least 57% of the total industrial production's value.
Ho Chi Minh City was asked to reduce the number of FDI enterprises which declare losses from 48% last year to 40% this year. 1,300 FDI-based business posted losses in 2007, accounting for 60% of all enterprises declaring tax. The number was further reduced to 48% in 2010, totaling 1,200 enterprises. However, businesses reported profits accounted for only 1% of all FDI businesses.
Vietnamese government has recently issued a decree on the regulation of interest incomes and gain from sale of foreign currencies by local businesses. Specifically, businesses must pay taxes on interest income from deposits at banks and interest earned from lending activity under any forms, credit guarantee fees, and other charges in the loan contracts. Other types of business income will also be taxed, including gain from capital or securities transfers. The new decree will take effect from March 1, 2012.
Gold bullion price in Vietnamese market last year was reported to increase by 18%, while the global market only experienced the increase of 11%. 2011 is also the year which shows the 11th consecutive year increase of domestic gold price, putting it to the throne in one of the best year profitability. Comparing with the beginning of the past year, when the domestic gold price stayed steadily at around 36 million dong per ton, gold bullion price now added 6.6 million dong more to go around 44.45 million dong per ton, or equivalent to the increase of 18%.
The Japan External Trade Organization shows that Japanese investors invested a total of $1.8 billion in Vietnam in 2011. So the Southeast Asia country continued to be the leading destinations for Japanese investors during the past year. It was reported that 208 Japan-backed projects were granted licenses in Vietnam in 2011, up 82% on year. Of those projects, manufacturing sector accounted for 54%, trade and service businesses made up 15%. Low production costs and cultural similarities are believed to help Vietnam attract Japanese investors.
The Ministry of Industry and Trade says last year the local enterprises of the country invested abroad around $950 million. The national oil and gas group Petro Vietnam was among leading companies invested most with $347 million, followed by telecommunication group Viettel with $185 million and Vietnam Rubber Group with $135 million. In 55 countries that Vietnam has invested abroad, Laos was the country which Vietnam poured most of the capital in with $3.4 billion, then followed by Cambodia with over $2 billion, Venezuela $1.8 billion, and Russia $776 million.
Goals for tourism industry in 2020 was set to welcome 10 to 10.5 million international arrivals with total revenue generated of 18 to 19 billion US dollars. The goals were part of the development strategy for the tourism sector to 2020 and Vision to 2030, recently approved by the Prime Minister. Specifically, Vietnam would target 7 to 7.5 million foreign visitors in 2015, 36 to 35 million domestic visitors, with total tourism revenue generated of 10 to 11 billion dollars. To reach goals, the Southeast Asia country was about to specialize in agricultural, eco and sea sunset tourism products, together with constructing tourism complexes with international grade.
Following news is some foreign trade news.
The General Statistics Office estimates that Vietnam spent more than $1 billion on importing 55,000 new cars in 2011. The figures rose 2.1% in volume and 4.2% in value against 2010, despite economic difficulties. 2011 is said to be a tough year for the local automobile industry when the government issued a series of measures and increased tax to restrict imports. The car market witnessed a decline in imports of fully built car in 2011 as only 3,400 units of this kind were imported in the last 5 months, showing a record low in 2 years.
The Ministry of Industry and Trade said gold import this year would be around 2.5 billion US dollars, up roughly 10% from 2011. Gold, together with other items like precious metal, auto parts and components, are the controlled import products for this year, with estimated value of over 6.6 billion US dollars, representing a year-on-year increase of 14%, accounting for roughly 6% of the country's total import value. Seafood export of Vietnam in 2012 is targeted at $6.5 billion, up 6.5% from 2011. It was set by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development at the Conference on 2012 Review and 2012 Plans. In details, export of shrimp is expected to earn $2.5 billion, catfishes $2 billion, and seafood products $2 billion. The fisheries sector is forecast to face many challenges in the coming year, including shortage of raw materials for export processing. In 2011, Vietnam was estimated to have gathered $6.1 billion from seafood exports, up 21% from 2010.
Vietnam Rubber Association said rubber export of the country hit a record high of 3.1 billion US dollars in 2011 after 800,000 tons were shipped. So the value has increased by 31% on year, while the volume rose slightly by 2.2%. The average export price of the rubber last year was $3,900 per ton. During the previous year, China remained a key market for Vietnamese rubber, accounting for 60% of the country's total rubber exports. Rubber export in 2012 is expected to be as much as that in 2011. During some first trading sessions of the year, the local stock market expectedly opened the new year in green. However, the market continued in sour note, extending the last year downturn. Gloomy and quiet atmosphere together with low liquidity are what our reporters could record in the first trading sessions in 2012.
This is the scenarios of morning session in some trading floors of the Vietnam stock market that we could record in some first days of the year. During some trading sessions, investors seemed more crowded, but they didn't come for trading stocks, they just sit and wait. It is also added by the low liquidity of the market from recent trading sessions, which were red in both national indexes and in green note in last trading sessions of 2011.
Chúng ta có thể thấy rằng ngay trong phiên giao dịch đầu tiên của năm mới 2012 thì cả hai chỉ số chứng khoán của Việt Nam là VN Index và Hanoi Index đều giảm sau phiên tăng điểm vào cuối năm. Ở đây ở thời điểm đầu năm thì về mặt thông tin chúng ta có thể thấy là cũng chưa có thông tin gì đặc biệt. Tuy nhiên chúng tôi cho rằng thị trường đang phản ứng theo diễn biến tâm lý chung của nhà đầu tư khi mà các thông tin về thị trường vẫn chưa tích cực. Trong khi đó trước mắt thì chúng ta vẫn còn một kỳ nghỉ lễ dài là Tết Nguyên đán. Vì vậy thì ở thời điểm cuối năm này thì về nhu cầu giao dịch chúng tôi cho rằng nhà đầu tư vẫn tương đối là hạn chế giao dịch. Những giao dịch lướt sóng chủ yếu nhằm vào những cổ phiếu mà nhà đầu tư có sẵn và giao dịch tranh thủ tận dụng cái lợi thế giao dịch mua bán cùng phiên. Trong giai đoạn cuối năm này có thể thị trường sẽ có những hồi phục ngắn, tuy nhiên tính chất hồi phục là chưa rõ ràng và còn thiếu yếu tố hỗ trợ nên thị trường cùng lắm có thể đi ngang chứ rất khó có thể có được những cái đợt tăng đáng kể trong giai đoạn ngắn trước mắt.
Clearly, investors' confidence hasn't felt firm fulcrum. The investors continue staying cautious and waiting as the market doesn't have any supporting information at the moment.
Trong năm 2012 mà khi mà một năm tài chính mới bắt đầu thì yếu tố được kỳ vọng nhất vẫn là sự trở lại của dòng vốn tín dụng khi mà các chỉ tiêu tín dụng của hệ thống ngân hàng được tính lại từ đầu. Khi đó thì sẽ có những cơ hội cho dòng tiền chảy vào thị trường chứng khoán, nhất là thời điểm khi mà nhà đầu tư nhận thấy giá trị cổ phiếu đã sụt giảm khá mạnh thời gian qua và cái yếu tố tâm lý bắt đáy của giới đầu tư thì vẫn luôn luôn có. Chỉ có điều là khi họ cần có những cái luồng tín dụng mới và việc dòng vốn tín dụng được xoay vòng lại từ đầu sẽ là một yếu tố hỗ trợ.
Trong nửa đầu năm 2012 thì tôi dự đoán là chắc chắn là vẫn sẽ còn nhiều khó khăn trong cái thị trường chứng khoán. Tiền tệ vẫn sẽ thắt chặt, nhưng tuy nhiên để ổn định tiền đồng. Nhưng tuy nhiên thì đây là cái vấn đề là bắt buộc phải làm trong thời gian tới để mà có thể là ổn định các cái chỉ số của nền kinh tế, sau đấy mới tiếp tục phát triển chứng khoán. Bởi vì doanh nghiệp khỏe thì nền kinh tế mới khỏe, mà nền kinh tế mới khỏe thì là thị trường chứng khoán mới khỏe. Chứ không chúng ta đây là đánh giá đúng bản chất của thị trường chứ không phải là đánh giá vào các cái giá trị nó không có thật. Nên là theo tôi nghĩ là nền kinh tế Việt Nam thì chắc có lẽ đến cuối năm 2012 thì có khả năng sẽ phục hồi. Nhưng tuy nhiên thì thị trường chứng khoán sẽ phản ánh trước nền kinh tế khoảng 3 đến 6 tháng. Nên tôi hy vọng là đến cuối quý 2 năm 2012 thì chúng ta có thể hy vọng là thị trường sẽ có một cái đợt phục hồi trở lại.
It can be seen that this is not the right time for the short-term investors to enter the market. But in the long term, the stock market still presents many factors to recover, like the information will be lowered soon, or the supports from the government to help restructure the market.
In the final part of the program, we will meet with Mr. Leon Cheneval, Executive Director of Cushman and Wakefield's Hanoi office. He will offer us an overview about real estate valuation and the situation in Vietnam.
Hello, Mr. Leon, and welcome to our program this week. And first of all, can you give a brief about the real estate valuation and its importance nowadays?
Valuation is an important industry, and it is a new industry in Vietnam. It has grown drastically over the last 15 to 20 years and most probably over recent years. A lot of young Vietnamese valuers are striving to achieve not only local recognition but also overseas recognition. The banks and most financial institutions rely on valuers very heavily. Valuers set the market, valuers interpret the market, valuers report value. And those values are relied on for very important things. They might be rating and taxing, but they may also be, more importantly, for finance. where banks will lend against that property as collateral and rely on the valuer.
So how do you value the demand for real estate valuation in Vietnam?
I think demand is high. I think if you looked at recently, some 500 students sat the Ministry of Finance exam, some 100 passed that exam, and next year at the next setting or next session of the Ministry of Finance, you'll see most probably another 500 odd applicants. So while there's only a small amount of registered valuers, the demand to be a valuer is very high.
So what is the differences between the valuation in Vietnam and in other countries?
The valuation industries in the countries do vary. The laws are different. I think that's the first thing we need to understand. We need to understand that not all countries have the same code of conduct or even the same standards, so they do vary from country to country. Most of the mature valuation countries or associations do have a long record of established codes of conduct. They have established methodologies of valuation. One of the things that's lacking in Vietnam is the availability of data. In most established property markets, there is readily available online property systems. Vietnam does not have that benefit as yet. So that is the distinct difference between Vietnam and if you compared Thailand, for example. If you look at countries like Australia and America, you look at England and Europe, they have long established institutions with good training programs. They have strong, solid codes of conduct and ethics, and they're enforced strongly across many of the institutions. So there are distinct differences at the minute, although Vietnam is changing and is certainly following with the international standards.
In recent time, people mention a lot about the real estate bubble in Vietnam. So what do you think about the issue?
I've made comment on the bubble theory before. I think Vietnam over the last 12 months has seen a huge decrease in some of the prices that were on offer. I think if we look at the residential market, for example, those prices have decreased by up to 30%. So I think Vietnam's in a very good position. It's had a heavy softening of prices. If you look at the office market, for example, it's softened drastically and come down to some very low rates, particularly if you went to the west of Hanoi and even in pockets of Ho Chi Minh City. So I don't think the bubble's a good term, but I think you've seen a drastic decrease and a positive decrease in prices, down to realistic levels.
And within 2011, the price of real estate has skyrocketed, then dramatically decreased. So how do valuators contribute to the decrease?
The phenomenon of those substantial price increases was driven off a variety of factors. I think there was most probably the phenomenon to buy real estate in the first instance, and it was most probably a good product. The share market, as you know, in Vietnam has not been strong, so property at that time was most probably the better option. How value has contributed to it, I don't see how we forced the prices up. I know at the time, and I have been valuing in Vietnam for a while, that it was difficult to substantiate those price increases. We did foresee that those increases were overinflated and could not be sustained. And looking at other markets and observing the property trends. So when you normally have a savage increase, unfortunately, you should expect a reverse decrease. Perhaps it's not as savage, but I think in the case of Vietnam and particular Asia Pacific, and you look at areas like China as well, that have had substantial increases in property values, that there had to be a decrease.
So in your opinion, how should customers find the best valuators?
You can't beat experience. I think that's a key factor. I think look for their association memberships. I think if they're a member of the Vietnam Valuers Association, that's a good starting point. I think look at their credentials, and obviously most valuers here have very good credentials, as do the foreign valuers. So I think look for experience, talk to your valuer, make sure they understand what you require. And valuations do take many forms, and some valuers aren't experienced. For example, plant and equipment's a very specialised area, and not all valuers have that experience. If you're looking at a mixed-use development where you're multiplying various components of a very large scheme, again, that takes experience and knowledge. So a young student or a young untrained valuer does not have the skill and ability.
So what do you think about the outlook of Vietnam valuator market?
It's very positive. Vietnam's valuers are very experienced, particularly the older group in my age bracket, if I could say that. The younger valuers are very intelligent. They're asking a lot of questions. They are growing in capability. So the outlook is very bright for them. I think in years to come they'll be pitted against their ASEAN counterparts. I think they'll be very good at what they do. They do participate strongly in debates, particularly when we're doing a valuation exercise. So I think they've got a great future.
So what is your recommendation to have improved the real estate valuation in Vietnam?
The Vietnam Valuers Association really does play a strong role in ensuring good standards for valuers in Vietnam. In turn, the ASEAN Valuers Association also plays a vital role. And most valuers and companies are members of both or either of those institutions. So the industry needs to look at those institutions for guidance, for support, and most importantly, education. While you can obtain a valuation license through several sources here, you can't beat experience. I think working with senior valuers, I think spending time in as many markets as you can. In my roles here in Vietnam, I've worked with a lot of very intelligent and very clever young valuers, and I think they need to spend more time looking at research data and obviously analysing sale prices. I think that's a very key, important part. Understanding what someone is willing to pay. Because there is a difference between market value and what is real value. Real value is what someone's prepared to pay for it. Sometimes market value might be a little bit overinflated. So I think doing your homework is an important message.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Xin cảm ơn.
The conversation has concluded our program this week. Thank you for watching. For comments and feedbacks, please send us an email at intowvietnam@vitv.vn or call us at 0422 08 288 or 0983 566 844. Goodbye and see you next time.